Alrighty, folks, we're now 15-3 in our last 18 Gold Club tier package plays on my premium page. We had Cincinnati money line yesterday in college basketball, and they got the job done against Baylor in an absolute sweat. You know, they had the game pretty much in control early. And then Baylor made a good comeback, and that was pretty much a one-possession game for the final minutes. And I'll tell you, that W, no matter how it looks like, we got it. That's going to be good for 83% during that stretch of plays I just mentioned. Of course, I've got another Gold Club play going off here on Wednesday. That play's already posted and available for access on my premium page right now. Got a nice early start on that. And the one thing you got to know about the Gold Club, it doesn't give you just one play a day. It's a full access, all-inclusive membership. Gold Club members get access to every single premium selection of mine, every single package, every single day for the next 30 days. And of course, before we go ahead and move on, just want to take a quick time out and welcome you to my free pick video here today for Wednesday, February 26, 2025. Happy Wednesday to you. Happy hump day to you. Weekend's right around the corner. We are halfway there. Of course, if you're joining me for the first time here today, my name is Brock Page. I've been dishing out free sports picks on YouTube since 2016. Of course, if you don't need access to all my premium selections, but maybe you could use like one a day, you could think about joining our Daily Best Play membership. That package gives you one premium selection every single day for the next 30 days. It's only just 6 cents a day for 30 days worth of access. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Massive slate, a lot of games here for you. Going to be a long podcast / video, so let's go ahead and get started. Mercer taking on East Tennessee State, 6 o'clock Eastern tip-off. ETSU's -10 at home, totals 148. Now, East Tennessee State has a losing record against the point spread, failed to cover in 5 out of their last 9. And the Buccaneers are actually shooting just 66% from the foul line, struggling from the stripe. And they're facing a Mercer squad on the other side who's actually in the top 40 in steals on defense, limiting opposing shooters to just 42% from the field. They can certainly be scrappy. And when it comes to offensive production, well, the Bears do shoot it well from the field, and they currently rank 27th in offensive boards, doing a great job getting second opportunities. Tyler Johnson averages 16 points a game. Ahmad Robinson over 16.5 points per contest himself. The Bears saw their last 3 straight stay under the total, 6-3 to the under in their last 9. Meanwhile, East Tennessee State games went 5-4 to the under in their last 9 themselves. I like Mercer +10, under 148. All right, next game, not on our big screen, some small school action. Boston U taking on Lehigh, 6 o'clock East. Lehigh's -2.5 at Stabler, totals 130 and a hook. Now, the Mountain Hawks are 8-4 straight up in Bethlehem this year. Boston U just 2-12 in their travels. Of course, the Lehigh Mountain Hawks have been, tough against the three-pointer on defense. They're allowing just 6 made 3 balls a game. And they're facing a BU team who struggles on the offensive end of the court themselves. The Terriers are averaging only 66 points a game. They're actually the 11th worst free throw shooting school in the country. Now, the Terriers saw unders recently versus American, Holy Cross, and Navy. Meanwhile, Lehigh 7-3 to the under in their last 10. Give me the Mountain Hawks of Lehigh, -2.5, under 130 and a hook. All right, next contest, Georgetown, UConn, 6:30 p.m. East. UConn's -13 at home, totals 140. Now, UConn's covering in just 40% of their ball games this year. That's a pretty big number to cover. Meanwhile, Georgetown, 16-11 straight up on the year themselves. Of course, the Hoyas covered in 4 out of their last 5. Those were in-conference covers against the likes of Creighton, Providence, and Xavier. Now, defensively, Georgetown allows only 66 points a game. They've been pretty tough, and they've also been tough to shoot against. Just 40% from the field on defense. They're facing a UConn team who's been kind of miserable against the number here recently. The Huskies failed to cover in 8 out of their last 10. And they're getting into a bunch of foul trouble on defense. They're actually in the bottom 25 in the nation in free throws allowed per game. When it comes to guarding the long ball, the Huskies are 318th in defensive three-point percentage. Now, the Huskies saw unders in 4 out of their last 7. Georgetown saw unders against Seton Hall, St. John's, and Villanova recently. I like Georgetown plus 13, keeping that one close, under 140. Next game, Duquesne taking on LaSalle, 6:30 p.m. East. Duquesne's the 1.5-point favorite away from home. Total's 139.5. Now, the Dukes are just 11-16 on the year, 1-7 on the road. And more recently, Duquesne took the loss in 7 out of their last 9. They're the 11th worst free throw shooting school in the country. Meanwhile, LaSalle on the other side, they're limiting their opponents to just 11 made free throws a game. 9-4 straight up in the Glazer Arena. And even though the Explorers aren't particularly offensive juggernauts, they don't turn it over a lot on offense, and they do rebound well when they miss shots. Corey McKeithen's averaging over 14.5 points a game, 88% from the stripe. And freshman Deuce Jones is averaging 12 points a game himself. LaSalle saw unders in 7 out of their last 10. Duquesne saw unders against Fordham, Loyola Chicago, and UMass. Give me LaSalle plus 1.5, under 139 and a hook. Next matchup here, a little Big Ten showdown. Michigan State taking on Maryland, 6:30 p.m. East. Maryland's minus 3.5 at home. Total's 150 and a hook. Now, the Terps saw unders recently versus Ohio State and Wisconsin. Just 67 points a game they're allowing on defense this year. Meanwhile, Michigan State games went 8-2 to the under in their last 10 themselves. Sparty's limiting opposing shooters to just 29% from three-land. Of course, these teams' last 3 head-to-head gatherings all stayed under the total as well. Can't give you a freebie on this one, but I do like the under 150.5. All right, next game, Dayton, Rhode Island, 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. Dayton is minus 4, total's 150. I believe that should be on our big screen behind me. There it is. The Flyers saw overs in their last 4 straight, 7-3 to the over in their last 10. Dayton's averaging 75 points a game on offense, and they really don't turn it over a whole lot when they have the ball in their hands. Now, Rhode Island on the other side, their games went 60% to the over in their last 10. They're 13th in the country in free throws made. Now, the over cashed in 4 out of these teams' last 6 head-to-head gatherings. Once again, can't give you a freebie on the side in this one, but I can give you the over 150. All right, next matchup, Illinois-Chicago taking on Northern Iowa. That's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip. UNI is minus 8, totals 146. Now, the Panthers are 19-10 on the year, 13-3 at home. UNI also covered in 64% of their games this year. And more recently, the Panthers went 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. They're pretty lights out from the field. Northern Iowa's 7th in the country in offensive field goal percentage. Trey Campbell's making 43% of his deep balls, double-digit points a game. And Titan Anderson's averaging over 15.5 points per contest himself. They're facing an Illinois-Chicago squad who's been pretty awful against the number here recently. The Flames failed to cover in their last 7 straight. Failures to cover against the likes of Evansville, Southern Illinois, and Illinois State. Now, the Flames also saw overs in 6 out of their last 10. UNI saw overs recently versus Belmont, Murray State, and Indiana State. I like Northern Iowa minus 8 over 146. All right, next contest. Citadel taking on Furman. 7 o'clock Eastern tip. Furman's minus 15, total 138.5. The Paladins are 21-8 on the year, 12-3 straight up at home. Citadel just 5-22 themselves, winless in 11 tries on the road this year. And I'll tell you, more recently, the Citadel hasn't won a ball game in over a month. They're 307th in 3 balls allowed on defense. And that's certainly good for Furman bettors because the Paladins are knocking down nearly 11 3-balls a game. They're 11th in the country in 3-pointers made per contest. PJ Smith shoots 40% from beyond the arc. Over 16.5 points a game for Smith. Meanwhile, Nick Anderson's averaging 14 points per contest himself. Nearly 40% from downtown for him as well. Of course, both schools saw overs in 7 out of their last 10 respectively. Give me Furman minus 15, over 138.5. All right, next matchup. Wofford taking on Western Carolina. I know I saw that goofy dog somewhere, that logo. But anyway, that's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip. There he is, right there. That is a Wofford Terrier. And I'll tell you, he's just 7-8 on the road this year, losing record against the point spread for the entire season. Of course, more recently, Wofford failed to cover in 7 out of their last 10. All kinds of problems at the foul line for these guys. Wofford's making just 64% of their foul shots. That puts them in the bottom 15 in the country in that category. And they're facing a Western Carolina team who covered in 4 out of their last 6 themselves. Covers against the likes of Chattanooga, East Tennessee State, and UNC Greensboro. And as much as the Catamounts have struggled shooting the basketball, they are still knocking down nearly a dozen 3-balls a game. They're also 36th in offensive boards per contest. Marcus Kell averages double-digit points a game, nearly 40% from outside the arc. And Bernard Pelote, he's scoring 14 points a game himself, 7.5 rebounds a night. Now, total-wise, it's Wofford who saw unders recently in 3 out of their last 5. Unders against VMI, Samford, and Mercer during that stretch. Give me Western Carolina plus 10, under 146. Next matchup, South Florida taking on Temple. That'll be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip. Temple's the 3-point favorite as the home team. Total's 151.5. Now, the Owls are 10-2 straight up at home. South Florida just 2-8 on the road. And more recently, the Bulls took the loss in 7 out of their last 10. Foul troubles and rebounding have been their weak point on defense. The Bulls currently rank 322nd in defensive boards per game. They're actually allowing over 15.5 free throws per night. And that's definitely good news for Temple because these guys do a nice job getting to the stripe. The Owls are 4th in the country in free throws per game, averaging nearly 20 foul shots a night. Of course, scoring-wise, Temple's averaging just about 80 points a game on offense. Jamal Mashburn Jr. averages 22 points a game, 43% from three-land. Steve Settles averaging a dozen points a game himself, 41% from beyond the perimeter. Temple games went 9-1 to the over in their last 10, 78% to the over for the entire year. Meanwhile, South Florida saw overs recently versus UAB, FAU, and this very Temple team. Give me the Owls of Temple minus 3, over 151.5. Next contest, Notre Dame, Clemson, 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. Clemson is laying a big number. What are they laying? Clemson is minus 14, totals 137. Now, Clemson's 22-5 on the year. I know this game is there. Clemson 22-5 on the year, 13-2 at home. The Tigers are also covering in 63% of their games. So if this big number is a concern to you, just know that these guys are doing a great job covering the point spread this season. Notre Dame on the other side, just 12-15 overall, losing record against the spread. The Irish also have just a 300 win percentage in their travels this year. Failed to cover the number in 8 out of their last 10. A lot of those games they're catching points as well. Now, defensively, Notre Dame's 322nd in turnovers. Not really opportunistic on defense. Of course, they're in the bottom 5 in blocks per game on the defensive end of the court. And they're facing an explosive Clemson squad who's 14th in shooting the 3-ball. The Tigers are making nearly 40% of their deep balls as a team. Chase Hunter is 42% from three-land, 17 points a game for him. And Victor Lakin scores double-digit points a game as well, 41% from downtown. Now, out of the Tigers' last 10 outings, they got the W in all of those contests except for one. They went 80% against the point spread during that stretch. Like I said, this is a really good covering team. 6 out of Clemson's last 9 got over the total. Notre Dame saw overs recently versus Pitt, SMU, and Boston College. Pretty small number here on the total. I think it flies over. Give me Clemson minus 14 over 137. All right, next game. St. Bonaventure taking on St. Joe's. That'll be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip. St. Joe's is minus 6.5. Total's 134 and a hook. The Hawks saw unders in 4 out of their last 6. They are 9th in the country in blocks per game on defense. Meanwhile, the Bonnies on the other side, their games went 4-2 to the under in their last 6 themselves. St. Bonaventure allows only 64 points a game on D. Not really expecting an offensive clinic in this one. I like the under 134.5. All right, next matchup. Fordham taking on George Mason, 7 o'clock East. George Mason's minus 13, totals 136.5. The Patriots are 21-6 on the year, 15-1 at home. Fordham just 11-16 themselves, 2-8 on the road. Of course, more recently, the Rams are on a 4-game skid. All kinds of difficulties this year on defense. The Rams are allowing nearly 78 points a game, 310th in defensive boards. Meanwhile, George Mason on the other side, they rebound well on offense, and they do a nice job getting to the foul line. Darius Maddox shoots 87% from the line, team leader in scoring. And Jalen Haynes, he's 57% from the field, dozen points per contest himself. Of course, as a team, the Patriots got the W in 9 out of their last 10. Now, George Mason saw overs recently versus St. Louis, Rhode Island, and St. Bonaventure. Meanwhile, Fordham games, well, they went over in 5 out of their last 7. Give me George Mason minus 13 over 136.5. Next matchup, NC State taking on Syracuse, 7 o'clock Eastern tip. Syracuse is minus 1.5 at home, totals 143. Now the Qs is 9-6 at home, winning record against the point spread this year. NC State just 11-16 overall, 0-8 on the road. The Wolfpacks covering in only 33% of their games this year. They took the outright loss in 8 out of their last 10. Meanwhile, Syracuse on the other side, they've been real good against the number. I realize this is a super short number, but the Orange did cover in 8 out of their last 10. And they definitely rebound well on the offensive end of the court. Donnie Freeman grabs just about 8 rebounds a game, 13 points per contest. And J.J. Starling averages 18.5 points a game himself. Syracuse saw overs in their last 3 straight, 6-3 to the over in their last 9. Meanwhile, NC State saw overs in 5 out of their last 9 themselves. I like Syracuse minus 1.5 over 143. All right, next game, K-State taking on UCF, 7 o'clock East. Central Florida's minus 4 at home, totals 155.5. Now, the Knights do have a losing record against the points spread this year. They failed to cover in 6 out of their last 7. Meanwhile, Kansas State has a winning record against the number themselves, 7-3 against the spread in their last 10. Coleman Hawkins leads the Wildcats in blocks and steals, second on the roster in rebounds. And David Nagesson leads the program in points per game and rebounds himself. K-State games did go 6-3 to the under in their last 9. UCF saw unders in 5 out of their last 9 themselves. I like Kansas State plus 4. Under 155.5. Next matchup, little SEC action here. Vanderbilt taking on Texas A&M, 7 o'clock Eastern tip. A&M's minus 7.5 at home, totals 146. Now the Aggies are 20-7 on the year, 12-2 straight up at home. Vanderbilt, not bad themselves, 18-9 on the year as well, but they're just 2-6 straight up on the road. And more recently, the Commodores took the loss in 5 out of their last 7. definitely having some problems on defense. Vandy ranks 310th in defensive field goal percentage, and they've been a little lax against the deep ball. The Commodores are in the bottom 20 in the nation in defensive three-point percentage. And they're taking on a Texas A&M team who really isn't overly dynamic on offense, but they do a nice job getting to the foul line. The Aggies are 17th in offensive free throw attempts per game. Meanwhile, on the defensive end, that's really been, these guys' strength. It's really tough to do anything against the Aggies. They're allowing just 66 points a game, top 25 in defensive boards. And no real surprise here, folks. The Aggies rank 11th in the country in field goals allowed per game. That is it. A&M games went 8-2 to the under in their last 10. Vandy saw unders recently versus Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Auburn. It can be Texas A&M minus 7.5, under 146. All right, next contest. Ole Miss taking on Auburn. That's going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. Auburn's minus 12.5 at home. Totals 153 and a hook. The Tigers are 25-2 on the year, 12-1 straight up at home. Meanwhile, Auburn's currently second in the country in blocks on defense. They're limiting opposing shooters to just 29% from three-land. And I'll tell you what, when it comes to covering the number, Ole Miss on the other side has certainly had their problems. The Rebels failed to cover in their last 4 straight, just 1-8 ATS in their last 9. The Rebels have really kind of rebounded poorly on defense this year, and they do send too many people to the foul line. They also took the loss in their last 7 straight meetings with Auburn, so if you're into historical trends, you certainly want to think about that one there. It's been all Tigers over the past handful of seasons. Now, Ole Miss saw unders recently versus Vanderbilt, LSU, and Texas. I like Auburn minus 12.5. Under 135 and a hook. All right, next game. Charlotte taking on Tulane. That'll be a 7 o'clock Eastern tip. Tulane is minus 8.5. Total is 141. Now, the Green Wave is 12-3 straight up at home. Charlotte just 1-9 on the road. And I'll tell you, more recently, the 49ers dropped 7 out of their last 10. And they've struggled on defense. They've certainly had a tough time on the defensive end of the court. They're in the bottom 20 right now in defensive field goal percentage. And no real surprise here, folks. Charlotte ranks 344th in defensive turnovers. Not doing a whole lot. Not a lot of takeaways for those guys. And they're facing a Tulane squad who doesn't turn it over much on offense themselves, doing a nice job getting to the stripe. Asher Woods is 89% from the foul line, double-digit points a game. And Rowan Brumball scores over 15.5 points per contest. Tulane saw overs in their last 4 straight. Charlotte saw overs in 5 out of their last 7. Give me Tulane minus 8.5, over 141. Next contest, Georgia State taking on Coastal, 7:30 p.m. East. Georgia State's minus 1, totals 146.5. Now, the Panthers got the W in 5 out of their last 6, rebounding pretty well on the offensive end of the court. Nick McMullen snags 9.8 rebounds a night. He's actually 15th in the country in boards per game. And Caesar Edwards scores 15 points a night himself, 45% from three-land. They're taking on a Coastal Carolina team who dropped 9 out of their last 10. Bottom 20 in field goals made. And no real surprise here, the Chanticleers are averaging just 66 points per contest. Now, Coastal saw unders recently versus Appalachian State, Bowling Green, and Marshall. Meanwhile, Georgia State games went 4-1 to the under in their last 5. I like Georgia State minus 1, under 146.5. Next game, George Washington taking on Loyola Chicago, 8 o'clock East. The Ramblers are minus 3.5, totals 139. Loyola saw unders in 5 out of their last 9 games, just 68 points a game they're allowing on defense this year. Meanwhile, GW also saw unders in 5 out of their last 9 themselves. They're holding their opponents to just 30% from three-land. I like the under 139. Next game, South Dakota taking on North Dakota State, 8 o'clock East. North Dakota State's -9, totals 169. The Bison are 20-10 on the year, 10-4 straight up at home. South Dakota just 17-12 themselves, 4-10 on the road. When it comes to defensive play, the Coyotes have been a bit of a disaster this season. They're allowing over 83 points a game. That's 6th highest in college basketball. And no real surprise here, folks. They're in the bottom 10 in field goals allowed. One of the worst defensive rebounding schools in the nation. And I'll tell you, it could be a big night for the Bison. They're one of the best three-point shooting schools in the country. They're making 40% of their three balls as a team. Second most three-pointers a game in the country. Jackson Monet, he's averaging over 20.5 points per contest, 40% from three-land. Guess you could say he's money from beyond the arc. And Jakari White, he's averaging 17 points a game himself, 40% from beyond the arc. Honorable mention goes to Mason Miller. Can't forget about him. He's making nearly 47% of his attempts from long range. A lot of shooters for these guys. Both programs did see overs in 6 out of their last 10, respectively. I like North Dakota State, -9 over 169. Next game, Rice, Memphis, 8 o'clock East. Memphis is -14.5, totals 149. The Tigers are 22-5 on the year, 11-2 at home. Rice just 13-15 themselves, 400 win percentage in their travels. The Owls also took the loss in 8 out of their last 10, and they have problems getting to the rack. They're actually 335th in field goals made per game. And they're facing a Memphis school who won 9 out of their last 10 themselves, holding their competition to just 42% from the field. Of course, on the offensive end, this is also one of the best three-point shooting programs in the country. The Tigers are currently 5th in offensive three-point percentage. P.J. Haggerty splashes 42% of his long balls, 21 points a game. And Tyrese Hunter scores over 14.5 points per contest himself, 41% from long distance. Now, oddly enough, Memphis did see unders recently against Florida Atlantic, South Florida, and Tulane. The under also cashed in 6 out of these teams' last 9 head-to-head meetings. So once again, if you're into historical trends, plenty of unders to go around. I like Memphis -14.5, under 149. Next game, Drake, Evansville, 8 o'clock East. Drake's -9, totals 122.5. Now, listen, the Bulldogs do play at an exceptionally slow rate. So this is a pretty large number for them. I mean, listen, they make shots. They do a lot of things well, but they just play at a very slow pace. So I'm a little bit concerned about them laying double digits on the road. Listen, Drake's attempting fewer field goals a game than any other team in college basketball, and they're facing an Evansville team who does a nice job against the point spread. The Purple Aces covered in their last 3 straight, 6-3 against the number in their last 9. Now, Evansville is currently limiting opposing teams to just 42% shooting from the field. And on the offensive end, it's Tayshawn Comer, who averages 16 points a game. 6'11", Connor Turnbull's 53% from the field. Evansville games went 8-2 to the over in their last 10. Drake saw overs recently versus Illinois State, Indiana State, and Southern Illinois. Listen, I don't think this is going to fly over the total. It might get over by just a half a point, but I do like Evansville +9 over 122.5. All right, next matchup, Belmont, Missouri State, 8 o'clock East. Belmont's -2, totals 147. The Bruins are 19-10 on the year, 8-4 on the road. Meanwhile, Missouri State just 9-20 overall, 7-7 straight up at home. The Bears took the loss in 8 out of their last 10. They're 324th in defensive field goal percentage. And they're facing a Belmont team who shoots it lights out from beyond the arc. The Bruins are 9th in offensive three-point percentage, averaging just about 11 made 3 balls a game. Tyler Lundblade makes 47% of his long balls, double-digit points a game. And Jonathan Pierre is averaging 14 points a night himself. Belmont Contest went 7-3 to the over in their last 10. Missouri State saw overs recently versus Illinois State, Murray State, and this very Belmont team. Give me Belmont -2 over 147. Next contest, Arkansas State, Louisiana, 8:30 p.m. East. Arkansas State's -10.5, totals 146 and a hook. The Red Wolves are 20-9 on the year, 61% against the point spread. Louisiana just 11-18 themselves, 5-11 at home. The Raging Cajuns are averaging only 66 points a game this year on offense. They're the 11th worst field goal shooting school in the country. And I'll tell you, when the Cajuns miss, which is often, they tend to not get it back. Louisiana is currently the 16th worst offensive rebounding program in the nation. Just a complete disaster when they have the ball in their hands. They're facing an Arkansas State team who's pretty tough to get to the cup against. They're limiting opposing teams to just 40% from the field, 30% from three land. And when it comes to the number, Arkansas State covered in 7 out of their last 10. Now, during that stretch, the under cashed in 60% of those games for the Red Wolves. Louisiana games went 7-3 to the under in their last 10. I like Arkansas State -10.5, under 146 and a hook. Next game, South Alabama, Southern Miss, 8:30 p.m. East. South Alabama's -6.5, totals 140. The Jags are 19-10 on the year, winning record on the road. Meanwhile, Southern Miss is 10-19 overall, losing record against the point spread. The Golden Eagles dropped 8 out of their last 9, and they definitely have issues shooting from long distance. They're currently 344th in offensive three-point percentage. And that's certainly bad news for them because South Alabama is tough to shoot against on defense. They're limiting their opponents to just 38% from the field, 4th in free throws allowed. Of course, as a team, the Jags got the W in 5 out of their last 7. Now, South Alabama saw unders recently versus Arkansas State, Texas State, and Louisiana. Meanwhile, Southern Miss saw the under cash in 6 out of their last 10. I like South Alabama -6.5, under 140. Next matchup, Penn State, Indiana, 8:30 p.m. East. Indy's -6 at home, totals 151.5. The Hoosiers are 16-11 on the year. Penn State's still hanging in there at 15-13. As bad as the Nittany Lions have played over the past, couple of months or so, they still have a winning record. And, a lot of that is thanks to, well, not a lot, but some of that is thanks to the Nittany Lions getting the W in their last 2 straight. And listen, Penn State still does a nice job on offense for the most part. They're averaging nearly 80 points a game, 27th in free throws made. Ace Baldwin makes 93% of his foul shots, team leader in scoring. And Zach Hicks is knocking down 40% of his 3 balls, double-digit points a game. I know earlier in the year, either Ace Baldwin was injured or kicked off the team or left the team. So keep an eye on him. Not completely sure he's in the lineup. Listen, it's a lot of games. Sorry. I just kind of blast through the stats sometimes, and that's a name that I'm seeing, and that guy you might want to look up on. But listen, Penn State still, over the past handful of games, are still doing a good job on offense. Meanwhile, the Hoosiers on the other side, they dropped 7 out of their last 10 themselves. They're little threat shooting the long ball. Indiana's currently 332nd in three-pointers made, 31% from beyond the arc. Now, the Hoosiers saw overs in 5 out of their last 9, throwing out that Purdue matchup. And in these teams' last 9 head-to-head gatherings, the over cashed in all of those contests except for 3. I like Penn State keeping this one close, at least within a couple of buckets. Give me Penn State +6 over 151.5. All right, next game, Villanova taking on Seton Hall, 8:30 p.m. East. Villanova's -8, totals 130. The Cats are 16-12 on the year, winning record against the point spread. Meanwhile, Seton Hall is 7-20 themselves, 5-9 at home. When it comes to the number, well, the Pirates don't cover many. They failed to cover in 8 out of their last 10. Horrible on the offensive end of the court this year. Seton Hall averages only 62 points a game, bottom 5 in the country in that category. And no real surprise, Seton Hall is also in the bottom 5 in shooting from the field. And they're facing a Villanova team who allows just 67 points a game on defense. Real tough to score against. They're 11th in defensive boards. Of course, on the offensive end, the Wildcats are second in the nation in both shooting from three-land and the foul line. They're making over 40% of their long balls as a team, 81% from the stripe. Eric Dixon scores over 22.5 points per contest, 42% from beyond the perimeter. And Jameer Brickus, Coatesville, PA's very own Jameer Brickus, knocks down 47% of his attempts from three-land. Now, Villanova saw overs in 3 out of their last 5. Seton Hall games went 4-1 at the over in their last 5 themselves. I like Villanova -8 over 130. All right, next game, Bradley, Valparaiso, 9 o'clock East. Bradley's -5.5, totals 150. The Braves are 22-7 on the year, 7-3 straight up on the road. Meanwhile, Valpo's just 13-16 themselves, losing record against the point spread this year. Of course, more recently, the Beacons failed to cover in 7 out of their last 9. They're allowing over 75 points a game for the year. And no real surprise here, Valpo currently ranks 320th in defensive field goal percentage. And unfortunately for them, they're taking on the best three-point shooting school in the country. That's right. That's the Bradley Braves. They're knocking down over 41% of their deep balls as a team. And as a matter of fact, 6 out of Bradley's top 7 scorers are all shooting 40% from three-land or better. Duke Dean leads the program in points per game. Zeke Montgomery averages 12 points per contest himself. When it comes to defensive play, the Braves are limiting their opponents to just 40% from the field. Now, oddly enough, as good as they've shot the 3 ball, they're tough on defense, and Bradley did see unders recently against Drake, Southern Illinois, and Belmont. I like Bradley -5.5, under 150. Next game, Texas, Arkansas, 9 o'clock East. The Razorbacks are -5.5, totals 148. Arkansas is 16-11 on the year, 11-4 straight up at home. Texas just 16-11 themselves, 3-5 on the road. The Longhorns also have a losing record against the point spread, and they failed to cover the number in their last 5 straight. And I'll tell you what, during that time frame, the Longhorns were pretty abysmal on defense. Texas allowed 86 points a game during that 5-game stretch I just mentioned. And listen, they have to slow down an Arkansas team who covered in 6 out of their last 7 themselves. Over 76 points a game they're averaging for the entire season. But I'll tell you what, the real strength of this Arkansas program is their ability to block shots. They're 5th in the country in defensive blocks, just 69 points a game they're allowing. The Razorbacks saw unders in 7 out of their last 10. Texas saw unders recently against Mississippi, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Missouri. I like Arkansas -5.5, under 148. Next matchup, Kentucky, Oklahoma, 9 o'clock East. Kentucky's -2, totals 162.5. The Wildcats are 18-9 on the year, winning record against the point spread. Oklahoma 17-10 themselves, losing record against the number. Of course, more recently, the Sooners dropped 5 out of their last 6. Just 64 points a game they averaged in those losses. And I'll tell you, they're going to have to be better than that because Kentucky's a top 3 point producing program. The Wildcats average over 85.5 points per contest this season. Kobe Bray is 44% from downtown. Otiga Owe leads the roster in points. Kentucky saw overs in 5 out of their last 9, throwing out that South Carolina game. Oklahoma saw overs recently versus Mississippi State, LSU, and Auburn. Give me Kentucky -2, over 162.5. Next matchup, Utah, Arizona, 9 o'clock East. Arizona's minus 14, totals 153. The Wildcats are 18-9 on the year, 11-3 straight up at home. Meanwhile, Utah is 15-12 themselves, 1-7 straight up in their travels. The Utes took the loss in their last 3 meetings with Arizona. And listen, they've been terrible shooting from the foul line this year. Utah's just 63% from the stripe, 3rd worst in college basketball. I believe they fired their coach a few days ago. And listen, this Arizona defensive effort on the other side, they're going to make you earn it. Wildcats they're limiting opposing shooters to just 40% from the field. They also covered the point spread in 7 out of their last 10. Now the under cashed in 3 out of the Wildcats' last 4 outings. Utah went 8-2 to the under in their last 10. I like Arizona minus 14, under 153. Next game, St. John's, Butler, 9 o'clock East. The Johnnies are minus 7.5, totals 149. Now, St. John's did fail to cover in 2 out of their last 4. Those were failures to cover against Creighton and Villanova. And listen, St. John's is very good. Can't take that away from them. But they're not going to beat you with the deep ball. Patino literally said that at a halftime exchange with the reporter. He knows they're not going to beat you with the long ball. They got to be physical down in the paint. And listen, they're taking on a Butler team who limits opposing shooters to just 42% from the field, and they do tend to avoid foul trouble. The Bulldogs are 15th in free throws allowed per game. Now, 5 out of these teams' last 6 gatherings did stay under the total. St. John's saw unders in 5 out of their last 8 themselves. Give me Butler plus 7.5, under 149. Next matchup, ACC. Virginia taking on Wake Forest, 9 o'clock East. Wake Forest is minus 8.5 at home, totals 130 and a hook. The Deacs are 19-8 on the year, 11-2 straight up at home. Virginia, down year for them, just 13-14, 3-6 on the road. The Cavaliers are scoring just 64 points a game, bottom 15 in field goals. Amazing to think just a few years ago, maybe not a few, a handful of years ago, I watched these guys win the national championship at a cigar bar in Tampa, at Davidoff Cigar Bar in Tampa. I watched that championship game. Now, they're squaring off against a Wake Forest team who's tough to get to the glass against. Wake Forest limits their opponents to just 39% from the field. And no real surprise here, the Demon Deacons allow only 67 points a game. Now, Wake Forest saw unders in 7 out of their last 10. I like Wake Forest minus 8.5, under 130 and a hook. Next game, DePaul, Creighton, 9 o'clock East. Creighton's minus 17, totals 145.5. The Blue Jays are 19-8 on the year, 67% against the point spread. And when Creighton's at home, they are 13-2 in their own arena. DePaul on the other side, 11-17 overall, 1-9 on the road. The Blue Demons also lost 8 out of their last 9. They gave up a considerable amount of points during that time frame. They got to try and hold off a Creighton team who covered in 8 out of their last 10. They also went 8-2 straight up during that stretch. Ryan Kalkbrenner averages over 18.5 points a game, 41% from downtown. And Stephen Ashworth is scoring 17 points per contest himself. Now, Creighton saw overs in 4 out of their last 7. I like Creighton minus 17, over 145.5. Next ball game, Boston College taking on Stanford, 9 o'clock East. Stanford's minus 10.5 in Maples Pavilion, totals 141. Now, Stanford's 17-10, but they do have a losing record against the point spread. As a matter of fact, the Cardinal failed to cover in their last 7 straight. Difficulties on offense during that span. Stanford averaged only 66 points a game in their last 7. They're squaring off against a Boston College team who covered the point spread in their last 4 straight themselves, 6-2 against the number in their last 8. Donald Hand shoots nearly 40% from 3 land, over 16.5 points per contest. And Chad Venning averages 12 points a game himself. Boston College games went 60% to the over in their last 10. Stanford saw overs recently versus Duke, NC State, and Wake Forest. Give me Boston College plus 10.5, over 141. Next game, BYU taking on Arizona State, 9:30 p.m. East. BYU's -4, totals 150.5. The Cougs are 19-8 on the year, 16-11 against the point spread. BYU Arizona State, they're 13-14 themselves, just 5-7 at home. Of course, more recently, the Sun Devils dropped 6 out of their last 7, and they struggle underneath the basket. ASU's 307th in defensive boards. Meanwhile, BYU on the other side, they're on a 4-game winning streak, 8-2 against the point spread in their last 10. The Cougs average 81 points a game, and they're actually 10th in the country in 3 balls made. Now, on the defensive end, they're probably going to win the battle in the paint. They're 14th in defensive boards, just 69 points a game they're allowing. BYU saw unders versus K-State, UCF, and Cincinnati. Give me BYU -4, under 150.5. Next game, Utah State taking on Boise State. This should be a good matchup, 10:30 p.m. East. If you're up late like I am, definitely want to catch that game. Boise State's -4, totals 150. The Broncos are 19-8 on the year. Utah State 24-4. Now, the Aggies are also 7-2 on the road, and they're averaging 82 points a game. Utah State is also currently the 6th best field goal shooting team in the nation. Ian Martinez averages 17 points a game. Foslev and Akano are drilling well over 40% of their long balls combined. And they're facing a Boise squad who really isn't overly threatening from 3 land. They're making just 32% of their attempts from outside the arc. The Broncos saw overs recently versus Nevada, New Mexico, and Colorado State. Meanwhile, Utah State games went 8-2 to the over in their last 10. I like Utah State +4, over 150. Next matchup, Big Ten. Ohio State, USC, 10:30 p.m. East. Ohio State's -1 away from home, totals 153. Now, the Buckeyes are 3-6 straight up on the road this year. USC 11-6 at home. The Trojans are averaging 77 points a game. They're in the top 35 in shooting from the field. Wesley Yates shoots 43% from long range, 13 points per contest. And Desmond Claude averages 16 points a night himself, 50% from the field. They're facing an Ohio State team who once again lost 6 of 9 on the road this year, currently on a 3-game skid. And on the defensive end, the Buckeyes tend to get into some foul trouble. Ohio State's currently 349th in free throws allowed per game. Now, OSU saw overs in 3 out of their last 5. USC 8-2 to the over in their last 10. Like USC +1, over 153. All right, next matchup, San Francisco, Oregon State, 11 o'clock East. The Beavs are -2.5, totals 142. OSU saw overs in their last 4 straight, 9-1 to the over in their last 10. Oregon State's currently a top 30 field goal shooting team, 8th in shooting from the stripe. Meanwhile, San Francisco saw overs recently versus Gonzaga, Loyola Marymount, and this very Oregon State team. That game actually saw 151 total points. And San Francisco is actually averaging over 75.5 points per contest themselves. I like the over 142 in that game. And with that, we're going to jump into our next and final college basketball breakdown. And I know we're approaching the hour mark, but we're not done. Don't change the channel. We got NBA to handicap too. We are not done. Burning the midnight oil. SMU Cal, 11 o'clock East. SMU's -2, totals 153.5. The Mustangs are -2, totals 153.5. SMU's 20-7 on the year, 6-2 straight up on the road. Cal's 12-16 themselves, losers of 6 out of their last 7. The Golden Bears are allowing over 75 points a game, 322nd in defensive field goal percentage. Now SMU on the other side, they're a top 25 point producing team. Chuck Harris is 43% from three land, dozen points per game. And Boopy Miller, he's 82% from the foul line, team leader in scoring. You always got to have a favorite name in college basketball, and this year it's Boopy Miller. I used to like Boo Booey, but where is Boo Booey? I forget where he's at. Is he in the G League or I don't know. That's showing my, I guess, lack of knowledge. I don't know. But Boopy Miller, that's the name this year. 82% from the foul line, team leader in scoring. And of course, as a team, SMU did get the W in 6 out of their last 8. Now, the Mustangs saw overs recently versus Clemson, Notre Dame, and Virginia Tech. I like SMU -2 over 153.5. And with that, now it's time for some NBA action. Celtics Pistons, 7 o'clock East. Boston's -3.5, totals 224 and a hook. Boston saw unders in 4 out of their last 5. Unders against the likes of Toronto, New York, and San Antonio. The Celtics are currently 2nd in the league in defensive field goal percentage. Meanwhile, Detroit games went 5-3 to the under in their last 8. The Pistons are currently 9th in field goals allowed, 3rd in defensive boards. I like the under 224.5. Next matchup, Sixers-Knicks, 7 o'clock East. New York's the 10-point favorite at MSG, totals 232. New York's 37-20 on the year, 20-10 in the Big Apple. Philadelphia, 17 games below 500, just 10-17 in their travels. The sputtering Sixers lost their last 8 straight. They failed to cover the point spread in all of those games. When it comes to defensive play, well, you can pretty much do just about whatever you want against Philadelphia. The Sixers are currently dead last in defensive field goal percentage. Of course, they're facing a top 5-point producing team in the Knicks, 3rd in shooting from the field. Jalen Brunson scores 26 points per contest, just about 40% from three-land. Mikal Bridges is averaging 17.5 points per contest himself. The third-place Knicks got the W in 5 out of their last 8. Scored a whole bunch of points in those victories. And during that stretch I just mentioned, the over cash for the Knicks in all of those contests except for 2. Meanwhile, Philly games went 60% to the over in their last 10. I like New York -10 over 232. Next game, Raptors-Pacers, 7 o'clock Eastern tip. Indiana's -9.5, totals 239. The Pacers are 8 games over 500, 16-9 at home. Meanwhile, Toronto 18-40 overall, 5-21 on the road. The Raptors also dropped 7 out of their last 9. And simply put, they just put way too many people to the foul line. Toronto puts more shooters to the stripe than any other team. And no real surprise, they're 25th out of 30 teams in points allowed per contest. Now, unfortunately for them, the Pacers really don't miss many shots from the field. They're 4th in offensive field goal percentage, top 10 point scoring team. Pascal Siakam gets 20 points a night, 7 rebounds and 40% from three-land. And Tyrese Halliburton's averaging 18 points a game himself, 8.7 assists a night. Pacer games went 60% to the over in their last 10. Toronto went 7-3 to the over in their last 10 themselves. I like the Pacers -9.5 over 239. Next matchup, Blazers-Wizards, 7 o'clock East. Portland's -6, totals 229. The Blazers are 8 games below 500, 9-19 on the road. They also failed to cover in 5 out of their last 6, bottom 10 in defensive field goal percentage. Of course, the Blazers are putting just way too many shooters to the line. Portland's in the bottom 5 in free throws allowed per game. And they're facing a Washington team who definitely covered a bunch of games in February. They're 8-2 against the point spread in the month of February. Covers against the likes of, covers against heavy hitters like Milwaukee, Indiana, and Cleveland during that stretch. They also saw overs in 5 out of their last 9. Portland saw overs recently versus Charlotte, Denver, and Phoenix. I like the Wizards +6 over 229. Next game, Hawks Heat, 7:30 p.m. East. Atlanta's -1, totals 229.5. Now, the Hawks are 4 games below 500, losing record on the road. Meanwhile, Miami's got a winning record in the Kaseya Center, 7th in points allowed. The Heat's also doing a good job staying out of foul trouble on defense. They're sending fewer shooters to the foul line than any other team in the NBA. They're facing an Atlanta squad who's, the Hawks been kind of chuckers when it comes to the 3 ball. They're 23rd in offensive 3-point percentage. And when it comes to defensive play, they're allowing nearly 120 points a game, bottom 3 in guarding the field goal. Now, Atlanta saw overs in 5 out of their last 9, throwing out that Orlando game last week. Meanwhile, Miami saw overs recently versus the Bucks, Raptors, and Mavericks. I like the Heat +1 over 229.5. Next game, Thunder Nets, 7:30 Eastern start. Oklahoma City's -17, totals 216. OKC's 46-12 on the year, first place in the West. They're also covering in 67% of their ball games. Now, Brooklyn's 5 games below 500 themselves, just 9-18 in the Barclays Center. The Nets are currently in the bottom 5 in blocks, 27th in defensive field goal percentage. And they have to hold off a Thunder squad who's 4th in field goals, 1st in shooting from the stripe. OKC's making over 82% of their attempts from the foul line. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scores a league-high 32 points per contest, 89% from the stripe. Meanwhile, Lou Dort and Isaiah Joe are knocking down 40% of their 3 balls combined. Thunder games went 6-3 to the over in their last 9. I like the Thunder, -17, over 216. Next matchup, Clippers-Bulls, 8 o'clock East. The Clippers are -8, totals 229. The Clippers are just 12-16 on the road, losers of their last 3 straight. And out of their last 10 ball games, the Clippers have had all kinds of issues covering the number. They failed to cover in all of those contests except for 2. They're taking on a Chicago team who covered in their last 3 straight themselves. Little problems getting on the scoreboard. The Bulls are a top 10 point producing team, 3rd in 3 balls made. They're currently averaging 16 made 3-pointers per contest. Now, both teams saw overs in 6 out of their last 9 respectively. I like the Bulls +8 over 229. Next game, Kings Jazz, 9 o'clock East. Sacramento's -8.5, totals 236. Now, the Kings are a game over 500. Utah, 14-43. The Jazz have also dropped 21 of 28 in the Delta Center. And listen, they haven't beaten the Kings in 7 straight meetings. The Jazz are allowing nearly 120 points a game, dead last in defensive turnovers. They're also allowing more 3 balls a game than any other roster. And they're facing a Kings squad who's 7th in scoring, 7th in field goal percentage. Zach LaVine's averaging 23 points a game with his new team. Domantas Sabonis still averaging a league-high 14.5 rebounds a night. Sacramento games went 7-3 to the over in their last 10. Utah 8-2 to the over in their last 10 themselves. I like the Kings -8.5 over 236. And with that, we're going to jump into our next and final breakdown for the video. Spurs Rockets, 9:30 East. Houston's -9, total 225. Now listen, the Rockets have not covered many numbers in the month of February. They're just 1-8 against the spread in their last 9. Bottom 5 in 3-pointers made. And listen, when the Rockets are shooting, they're actually getting more shots blocked per game than any other team besides one. And they're taking on a Spurs club who Although struggling recently, they still don't really get into a ton of foul trouble on defense. They're putting fewer shooters to the stripe than any other team besides one. The Spurs also saw unders in their last 5 straight. Houston saw unders recently versus Milwaukee, Golden State, and Toronto. I like San Antonio +9, under 225. With that, folks, now it's time for our quick pick recap. College basketball, Mercer +10, under 148. Lehigh -2.5, under 130 and a hook. We're 15-3 in our last 18 Gold Club plays on my premium page. Good for 83% during that stretch. Georgetown +13, under 140. LaSalle +1.5, under 139 and a hook. I like the under 150.5 in that Michigan State-Maryland matchup. I like the over 150 in the Dayton-Rhode Island game. Northern Iowa -8, over 146. Furman -15, over 138.5. Western Carolina +10, under 146. Temple -3, over 151.5. Clemson -14, over 137. Give me the under 134.5 in that St. Bonaventure-St. Joe's matchup. George Mason -13, over 136.5. Syracuse -1.5, over 143. Kansas State +4, under 155.5. Texas A&M -7.5, under 146. Auburn -12.5, under 153 and a hook. Tulane -8.5, over 141. Georgia State -1, under 146.5. Give me the under 139 in that George Washington Loyola Chicago game. North Dakota State -9, over 169. Memphis -14.5, under 149. Evansville +9, over 122.5. Belmont -2, over 147. Arkansas State -10.5, under 146 and a hook. South Alabama -6.5, under 140. Penn State +6, over 151.5. Villanova -8, over 130. Bradley -5.5, under 150. Arkansas -5.5, under 148. Kentucky -2, over 162.5. Arizona -14, under 153. Butler +7.5, under 149. Wake Forest -8.5, under 130 and a hook. Creighton -17, over 145.5. Boston College +10.5, over 141. BYU -4, under 150.5. Utah State +4, over 150. USC +1, over 153. Give me the over 142 in that San Francisco-Oregon State matchup. And give me SMU -2, over 153.5. NBA under 224.5 in that Boston-Detroit matchup. Knicks -10, over 232. Pacers -9.5, over 239. Washington +6, over 229. Heat +1, over 229.5. Thunder -17, over 216. Bulls +8, over 229. Sacramento -8.5, over 236. Give me the Spurs +9, under 225. And with that, folks, that's going to do it for me. Don't forget to check me out on my premium page. And if you do end up getting a membership here today on my premium site, just a friendly reminder, you're going to get access to that membership every single day for the next 30 days. And as an added bonus, you're also going to get access to all my cheaper memberships during that time frame, absolutely free. Going to be included with your membership. That's why I always tell folks, that Gold Club package, it's a full access, all-inclusive membership. Gives you access to every single premium selection of mine, every single package, every single day for the next 30 days. Of course, if you don't want access to all my premium selections, but maybe you could use like one a day, our daily best play costs just 6 cents a day for 30 days worth of access. That is it. But most importantly, folks, gotta thank you for joining me right here on the free video. Really hope you enjoyed all this great free content, all this great free information. With that said, folks, happy Wednesday to you. Happy hump day to you. I look forward to seeing you later on today on my premium page.